I am 99 years old, and I have outlived 4 doctors who told me what I should and should not be eating. And I want to tell you something that the food industry doesn't want you to know, that the supplement companies definitely don't want you to know, and that most nutritionists, God bless them, can't tell you because they learned it from a textbook. And I learned it from 54 years of putting my hands in the ground and watching what comes up out of it. I have been eating from a garden since I was old enough to pull a carrot. My wife Bessie cooked from that garden for 61 years until cancer took her in 2009, and I have been cooking from it myself every day since. I buried my son Earl Jr. in 2001. I buried my best friend Curtis in 2014. I buried my brother Alton in 2018. I sold the land in 2020, and that about finished me for a while because some things are harder to lose than others, and the land was the hardest. But I am still here, still eating, still cooking, still ornery enough to be worth talking to, according to most people who know me. I am going to tell you the 5 foods that I have eaten nearly every day of my adult life. Not supplements, not powders, not anything you need a credit card and a subscription to obtain. Food, real food, the kind that grows in dirt and doesn't come with instructions on the back of a package. And I am going to tell you why I believe, with everything I have, that food is not just fuel. It is information. It is relationship. It is the most direct conversation you will ever have with your own body. And most people in this country have been having that conversation in the wrong language for so long, they forgot there was another one. Now, before you decide whether to keep listening to a 99-year-old man talk about vegetables, let me tell you who I am. I am not a scientist. I want to be completely clear about that. I have never had a laboratory. I have never published a study. I have never been invited on a television program. And I suspect this video right here is probably the most people who have listened to me at one time since the Thomasville Harvest Festival of 1971. I grew up on a farm outside of Valdosta, Georgia, that my grandfather cleared with his own hands before the First World War. We did not have much money. We had a lot of land and a lot of work and a grandmother named Nettie who could look at a person and tell you what was wrong with them based on what they were eating and who was right about it more often than not in ways that I still find remarkable. My grandmother Nettie said, "Boy, everything your body needs is already in the ground. Your job is to eat what grows near you. Eat it fresh, eat it every day, and don't let anybody convince you that something that comes in a box knows better than something that comes out of the earth." I have followed that advice for 99 years, and I am still here. And she followed it for 94 years, and she was still sharp when she left, and I consider that sufficient evidence. I started farming seriously in 1947. I ran a produce stand on Route 84 for 54 years. I watched what people bought, and I watched what they didn't buy, and I watched the people who bought from me and the people who bought from the grocery store, and I developed opinions about what I saw that I have been holding on to and mostly not saying out loud for about 40 years. Today, I am going to say them. The moment that crystallized all of this for me was a Thursday morning in the summer of 1988. I was 64 years old, and I had just come in from the garden. My neighbor Harold, good man, worked at the textile plant, came over for coffee, and he looked gray, just gray, in a way I had not seen before. He was 61. He had been having chest problems for 2 years. He ate, I say this with love, terribly, and he looked at my breakfast, which was what I am about to describe to you, and he said, "Walter, is that all you eat?" And I said, "Harold, is that why you look like that?" And he laughed and I laughed, and he died of a heart attack 14 months later at 62 years old. I have thought about that conversation more times than I can count. Not with judgment. Harold was a good man, and the world that was sold to his generation about food was a world designed by people who were not thinking about Harold's health. But I have thought about it with a kind of quiet urgency that I am going to try to pass on to you right now. Here is the thing I need you to understand before I tell you about the 5 foods, because without understanding this first, the list is just a list, and a list is not enough. We have been taught to think about food as fuel, calories in, energy out, manage the numbers, follow the pyramid, take the supplement, read the label, and that framework is not entirely wrong. It is just so incomplete that it ends up being harmful in the way that a map with half the roads missing is harmful. It gets you somewhere, but not to where you actually need to go. Food is not fuel. Food is communication. Everything you put in your body sends a message to your cells, to your organs, to the systems that are trying to keep you upright and thinking and alive. And the question is not only how many calories is this sending or how many grams of protein. The question is, what is this saying? What information is this delivering? And is my body built to receive that message? Or have I been sending signals in a language my body hasn't spoken for 100,000 years? I know that sounds like a lot coming from a vegetable farmer in Georgia, but here is the paradox that I have been sitting with for 50 years and that I cannot shake. The same generation that produced the most advanced medical science in human history is the sickest generation of human beings that has ever lived in this country. We have more hospitals and more medications and more research and more knowledge about the human body than any civilization before us. And we have more obesity, more diabetes, more heart disease, more inflammation, more chronic suffering than any civilization before us, at the same time, in the same country, in the same lifetime. Now, if the medicine is right and the food is also right, how do you explain that? I'll tell you how I explain it. The food isn't right. The food hasn't been right for a long time. And the medicine, good as it is spending all its time treating the consequences of the food instead of fixing the food. And nobody with money is particularly interested in fixing the food because there is no money in telling people to eat what grows in the ground near where they live. There is, however, considerable money in telling people their problems can be solved with something that comes in a bottle. Now I'll tell you about the 5 foods. The first food is sweet potatoes, and I have eaten one every single day for as long as I can remember, and I will tell you why I believe they matter as much as I do. My grandmother Nettie kept sweet potatoes in a bin in the root cellar from harvest through late spring. She ate them roasted, she ate them boiled, she ate them in soups, She said, "This is the food that kept us alive when everything else failed, and that kind of track record means something." She was not wrong about the track record. Sweet potatoes have fed people through drought and poverty and winter for generations, and a food that can do that is not doing it with nothing. It is doing it with something real. I eat mine roasted in a cast iron skillet with nothing on it but a little of the fat from whatever I cooked last. Lard mostly, which is another thing several doctors told me to stop eating and which I've been eating for 99 years, so I think we can consider that argument settled. The sweetness in a real sweet potato, freshly harvested, is not the sweetness of added sugar. It is the sweetness of something complete, of something that has everything inside it that it was designed to have. What I notice when I have not eaten a sweet potato for several days, and this has happened a handful of times in my life due to circumstances, is that something in my body notices the absence before my mind does. My joints feel different. My energy is different. Something is missing at a level I cannot fully explain, but that I have come to trust completely. You can explain that with fiber and beta-carotene and potassium and all the things that appear in the research if you go looking for it. I explain it simpler than that. I explain it by saying, this is a food my body knows. It has been eating it or something like it for a very long time, and it remembers. The second food is collard greens, and I want to tell you about them in a way that goes past the obvious things. Bessie cooked collards on Sundays, always on Sundays. She would start them in the morning in a big pot with some smoked meat and onion, and let them go low and slow for most of the day, and by afternoon the whole house smelled like something that I still cannot smell. Even now, even 15 years after she has been gone, without feeling her presence in the kitchen in a way that is more memory than grief. That is what I mean when I say food is more than fuel. Bessie's collards were also every Sunday afternoon of 61 years of marriage. You cannot separate those things, but past the feeling of it. Collards have been growing in southern soil for 300 years, and people have been eating them through heat and cold and scarcity and hardship, and arriving at old age still functional. And I think that record deserves more credit than it gets from people who discovered kale in 2015 and acted like the South had been sitting on ignorance the whole time. Kale is fine. Collards are better. I'll die on that hill, possibly literally, and I am at peace with it. I eat them 2 or 3 times a week. I cook them like Bessie did, low and slow, because the cooking matters as much as the food. A collard greens cooked for 4 hours in a good pot is a different thing than a collard greens cooked for 10 minutes because someone is in a hurry. Slow cooking is itself a philosophy. It is saying, this is worth the time. Most things that are worth anything say that. The third food is raw garlic. And this one I include knowing full well that not everyone in my life has appreciated it. Bessie had opinions about the garlic. I will leave it at that. She was not wrong about the social aspects of it. She was also not wrong when she lived to 87 years old while eating it with me most of her life. My grandmother Nettie kept braids of garlic hanging in her kitchen year-round. She said her mother had done the same, and her mother before that. She ate a clove most days, raw, because she said cooking takes some of the purpose out of it. I started doing the same thing when I was in my 30s, and I have done it most days since, and I am 99 years old, and my blood pressure at my last checkup was the kind of blood pressure that makes doctors ask questions and write things down in a way that suggests they are surprised. I am not surprised. I have been having this conversation with my body every day for 60 plus years, and my body has been responding to it. Now I'll tell you something about garlic that goes past the antimicrobial and the cardiovascular research, which you can find yourself and which is considerable. There is something in the ritual of it, in choosing every morning to do a thing that is good for you, that requires a small amount of commitment, and that produces no immediate reward. That practice, the daily small commitment to your own body's well-being, is itself medicine. The garlic is part of it. The choosing is part of it too. The fourth food is eggs, and I am going to address the people who are already shaking their heads. I have eaten eggs most mornings of my adult life, fresh eggs from my own chickens for most of those years, which is a different thing than a factory egg in ways that matter. The color of the yolk alone will tell you something if you have seen both kinds side by side. I have been told by no fewer than 3 doctors in 3 different decades to cut back on eggs because of cholesterol. The first doctor who told me this is gone. The second doctor who told me this is gone. The third doctor who told me this retired 8 years ago, and I sent him a note when he did that said, "I am still eating my eggs." He wrote back and said the science had changed anyway. The science does change. The eggs remain. I find this instructive. A fresh egg from a chicken that has been walking around in grass and eating things that chickens are designed to eat contains everything a living thing needs to become another living thing. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. My grandmother Nettie would say, "If it can make a life, it can sustain one." I have not found a more elegant summary of the argument. I eat 2 eggs most mornings, cooked in cast iron with lard, with whatever is fresh from the garden alongside them. That is breakfast. It has been breakfast for the better part of 70 years. I have no complaints about it, and neither apparently does my body. The 5th food is the simplest one, and the one I think people underestimate most severely. Beans, specifically dried beans that I cook myself from scratch, which I have done every week of my adult life without exception. Not canned beans, dried beans that I soak overnight and cook low and slow the following day. Pinto beans mostly, and butter beans and black-eyed peas, which in Georgia are not optional, they are a requirement. These beans have fed my family and the families around mine through poverty and war and drought and every kind of hardship that a Georgia farming life can produce, and they have done it because they are, without any exaggeration, among the most complete foods available to a human being at a price that anyone can afford. I know people who take 6 different supplements every morning and are sick half the time. I know people who have been eating beans and greens and eggs from their own land their whole lives and are still functional at ages that surprise their doctors. I do not consider this a coincidence. Curtis, my friend Curtis, who I lost in 2014, used to say that the only thing wrong with beans is that people stop being poor enough to eat them every day. And there is something to that I have thought about a long time. The foods that kept poor people alive through hard times are often the foods that turned out to be the most genuinely sustaining, not the foods that were marketed to people who had money, the foods that were all that was available to people who didn't. There is a lesson in that about who the food system was designed for, and it is not a comfortable lesson, but it is a true one. I want to stop for a minute and talk to you directly about something, because I know what some of you are doing right now. You are watching an old man talk about sweet potatoes and collard greens and thinking, that is interesting. But my situation is different. I have a busy life. I don't have time to cook beans from scratch. I don't have a garden. The fresh eggs are not available to me. This worked for him because of circumstances I don't have. You are talking yourself out of something before you have tried it. I hear that excuse, and I say excuse with affection, not judgment, in every variation. I don't have time. It's not convenient. My family won't eat it. It's cheaper to get the other thing. I'll start when things settle down. Let me tell you about things settling down. I am 99 years old. Things do not settle down. Things move and change and end and begin. And the person who is waiting for the quiet moment to start taking care of themselves is going to wait a long time and arrive at the end of that wait without having done the thing. Right now, while you are sitting here watching me, someone in your life is eating something that is shortening their time here. Your spouse, your parent, you yourself at the meal before this one and the meal before that. And the remarkable and terrible thing about food is that its effects are slow and quiet and do not announce themselves until they have been accumulating for years. And by the time the announcement comes, you are in a doctor's office having a conversation you did not want to have. You do not have to eat exactly what I eat. You have to eat real food most of the time. That comes from something that was alive and grew in ground and did not pass through a factory before it reached you. That is the whole argument. Everything else is detail. I am going to die. I am 99 years old, and I know that the way you know the season is changing, not with drama, just with a quiet understanding that this is how things go and it is all right. What I think about is not my own end. I have made my peace with that. What I think about is the people in your life who are eating themselves into an early one and who do not know it yet, or who know it in the way you know something you have decided not to look at directly. Your mother who eats alone now and has stopped cooking real food because it feels like too much effort for one person. Your father whose idea of a meal has gotten smaller and worse since your mother passed. Your friend who is tired all the time and blaming the tiredness on everything except what they are putting in their body every day. They do not need a lecture. They need someone to cook for them, or to sit with them while they cook, or to show up with something real and set it on the table and eat it together without making a project out of it. Food, when it is right, is one of the most reliable forms of love there is. It says, I thought about what your body needs. I took the time to make it. I am handing it to you. That means something that goes past nutrition. So here is what I want you to do, not eventually. This week, cook one meal from scratch, one real meal with real ingredients. that did not come from a box or a bag or a drive-through window. Make it simple: beans and greens, eggs and sweet potato, whatever combination of real food you can manage. Sit down and eat it slowly, without the television, without the phone. Just the food and whoever is at the table with you, if anyone is. And if there is someone in your life who is not eating well, not as a judgment, but as a genuine observation, bring them something. Cook for them, or bring them something cooked. That is the argument I have been making for 99 years, and I believe it more now than I ever did. My grandmother Nettie used to say, "Show me what a person eats, and I'll show you how they think about whether they deserve to be here." I think you deserve to be here. I think the people you love deserve to be here. Feed yourself and feed them accordingly. You are what you eat. Make sure you're worth something.